What better way to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Elder Scrolls than by looking at a part of the games that could easily be overlooked, the user interface. In this video, let's take a look at the UI design, functionality, and even some of the art of each mainline game in this iconic series to see how it's evolved. We'll first discuss Arena and Daggerfall, then take a look at Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, which will all be from my previous videos on those games, with some tweaks and added parts here and there.
That ought to do it.
So let's go back to when the series began. The Elder Scrolls Arena was the very first game in the series, released in 1994, and its sequel, Daggerfall, came out just 2 years later in 1996. For this section, I'll be grouping them together, but just know that these are two separate games with two separate stories, but they are quite similar with the user interface. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the cover art for both of these games. The Arena cover art inspired the Arena posters found throughout Oblivion, which is a really neat reference. And the art is just so 80s and 90s fantasy in the best way possible.
She is such a bad bitch though!
The Daggerfall cover is just radical.
Radical!
And is arguably the best cover art in the entire series. They weren't playing around with the title of the Elder Scrolls. A lot of the UI at the beginning of each game when you learn the story and create thy character uses lots of scroll and storybook imagery. I like this a lot. I think it's very on theme and has that fantasy RPG pizzazz you would expect from games like this. With Arena, you get the game's backstory by having it appear on scroll pages. Daggerfall does this a little bit by showing you pages of an old book instead, then of course showing the epic live-action cutscene featuring our boy Uriel Septim. He's also an important character in Arena, meaning he plays a hand in almost every mainline Elder Scrolls story, except for Skyrim. I do wonder what happened to his hair in Daggerfall though. Anyways, let's get back on track. The heads-up display for both games shows your character to the far left with your health, fatigue, and magicka bars to the right. In both games, your health is represented by the green bar, which really threw me off at first since I had become so used to red for health and green for stamina in the later games. In both games, clicking on your character's lovely face in the corner will show you your character sheet, which has all of your character stats. Then there are some symbols further to the right with different choices. In Arena, this is how you can draw your weapon, look at your map, steal items, check your character's status, cast spells, check your logbook, which is basically a quest log, use items, and camp, where you can heal your character or just pass some time. Daggerfall is similar to this, but with some added actions, like an interaction mode where you can go into steal mode for pickpocketing, grab mode for, well, grabbing items, info mode, which shows the player information about different objects and characters throughout the game, and dialogue mode for speaking with NPCs.
The racist.
There's also a new compass here that will tell you your location and the current date. It seems that Daggerfall took the UI of Arena and just made it more convenient. The inventory as a whole is better in Daggerfall, much easier to use and actually sorts items into different categories. These menus were a little bit difficult for me to get, but once I understood each symbol on the HUD and what it meant and played around a little bit more, I figured it out. These games are not for the faint of heart. My first time playing Arena, I died to a rat because I couldn't even figure out how to attack until I looked it up on the internet. Luckily, Daggerfall does give you the option of having a tutorial, which definitely helped me out a lot, but if you're a pro, seasoned gamer, then maybe you'll have an easier time than I did.
Gotcha, bitch!
Now let's talk about the look of Arena and Daggerfall's UI. The user interface of both games looks pretty similar, except Arena's UI uses a darker gray backdrop and some dark blue for the character sheet, while Daggerfall uses a lighter gray. These backdrops for the HUD and other menus throughout the game look like stone, which is certainly different from the use of scroll paper you see before beginning the game, and in some parts of the UI, like the logbook and map. I really like it though. I think it looks cool and looks pretty medieval. Also, I love the sword cursor in Arena. Bring back fun-themed cursors. These aren't my favorite user interfaces of the series, but I do think they have awesome designs nonetheless. The UI of these games, of course, lean into sort of being a virtual tabletop RPG, and the designs for the HUD and different menus like your inventory and spellbook has a lot of character. Also, the soundtracks for both of these games have some certified bangers, kind of underrated. Next up, let's talk about The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind, released in 2002. Right off the bat, as I loaded up Morrowind and saw this awesome loading screen, I could already tell that there was some cool-ass artwork and scrumptious UI design in this game.
Someone cooked here.
The loading screens and main menu have that scroll paper background, which is a great touch, and the Morrowind logo has these sketched lines behind it, which I know might be a minor detail, but I really like it. The user interface of Morrowind uses a completely different color palette than what we would see a few years later with Oblivion, lots of black and gold. It's a very nice color combination, very regal, and quite fitting for the game. The heads-up display shows your character's health, magicka, and stamina levels, as well as any weapons and spells you have equipped on the bottom left side of your screen. To the right, you see the active effects your character has and a minimap. Viewing your character's stats, inventory, map, and magic are simply referred to as menus, and each menu appears like tabs or windows on a computer that you can rearrange and resize to your liking. You can even pin one of these menus to your screen while playing as well. Each item in the game has a photo of the object, and each attribute, skill, spell, effect, and location has icons as well. And you can see your character off to the side in the stats menu. Very cool. The game manual for Morrowind also follows the same color scheme and design, except for using more white text. Now, I am a fan of the aesthetics, but how about the functionality? Well, I think the menus are a little bit complicated, especially for newbies like myself, and navigating through them was a little confusing at first. Morrowind, along with the earlier games in the series, took heavy inspiration from tabletop RPGs. This inspiration is clear to see in the gameplay, like with the combat system, and the menus, which are very reminiscent of tabletop RPG character sheets. Once I found a good layout for my menus and played more of the game in general, I got used to them pretty quick. You actually don't view your quests through these menus, you instead use a journal. Your journal in Morrowind is how you access your quests and read about topics you learn from other characters. As I'm sure most of you know, this game is very text-heavy, and you can ask any NPC about different topics, like locations, factions, and other characters. Luckily, each time you learn new information about a topic, it's logged in your journal so you can refer back to it when needed. The journal is also where you can find information about your current quests. There's usually a blurb of text for each quest, providing the player with basic information on where to go and what to do. These journal entries on quests and topics are from the Nerevarine's perspective, which makes sense since, it's their journal. Since asking around for information is so encouraged in Morrowind, it's useful that the journal keeps track of what the player knows about different topics, in case they need to look something up or just for some good old lore. In your journal, and when speaking with NPCs, there are hyperlinks for different topics, locations, and characters, which makes it very easy to find the information you need. The journal has a nice design, using the same fantasy font seen throughout the game, and the old and worn-looking pages. Now, let's talk about the art of this game, which is an important factor of UI design. Each loading screen goes hard as hell and has amazing artwork, showing creatures you can encounter throughout the game, like Bone Lords, Silt Striders, and Clan Fears. Oh god, not these guys again. In the PC version of Morrowind, you see these loading screens with cool photos of creatures on them, but with the Xbox version, you get even more loading screens, and each of them gives hints to the player. At the beginning of the game, when you select your class and birth sign, we see images for each one. The birth signs are a little hard to see, but look fantastic, and I love the use of the constellations. The images for each class depict different items and weapons related to the class. This is a nice touch, and I think these provide good visuals for the attributes and skills each class specializes in. You can also see art in different places across Vvardenfell, like on shrines, banners, and signs. The Art of Morrowind is a book that's filled with both concept and final images made for the game. The pictures in this book are spectacular, and I highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan. And a quick side note, not related to the UI necessarily, but I love the sound design, especially the nice, crisp sound of flipping a page in your journal, and the sound that plays when you level up your skills. All in all, I'd say I'm definitely a fan of the user interface and art design of Morrowind. The black and gold color scheme, along with the high fantasy aesthetics and fantastic artwork seen around Vvardenfell, does an excellent job of immersing the player into the alien, eerie, and interesting province of Morrowind. The menus and the journal took some getting used to, but after playing for a while, I'm definitely on board. And I gotta admit, I kinda had fun rearranging my menus. At the time of me posting this video, I'm still making my way through Morrowind, but I have really enjoyed the game thus far.
Fast as fuck, boy.
I will admit that my little sky zoomer brain had a hard time navigating without having quest markers and fast traveling. And having no guarantee of my attacks even doing damage definitely threw me for a loop. On the bright side, not having quest markers forced me to explore the world on my own and find my own paths. I'm sure they exist, but I have personally never seen a game with such an alien world like Morrowind. And I mean this in the best way possible because the map is really, really cool. I truly felt like an outsider, especially when I first left the ship and looked over to see a silt strider looming off in the distance. There are so many dubious creatures in Morrowind, and such a cool world to explore. There's lots of interesting quests, storylines, and a lot of, colorful NPCs. Oh, and lots of racism.
Today's subject is slavery.
If you haven't already, I highly recommend giving Morrowind a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Next in the series is The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, released in 2006. So, I played The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion for the very first time in 2023. I know, I'm way behind. But I really enjoyed playing Skyrim and wanted to play more in the world of Tamriel, so I bought Oblivion on Steam, and the rest is history. Despite some of its flaws, like the combat, I enjoyed the game overall. The NPCs are a little quirky, but I love them. It makes for a very entertaining playthrough.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking.
There was one thing that immediately piqued my interest when I first began my playthrough: the artwork and user interface. Hear me out, I think the user interface design of Oblivion is better than Skyrim. So a major difference that I noticed is the inventory. Your inventory in Oblivion, referred to as your journal, has a scroll-like background, which makes sense, has 2D drawings for each item, and has icons for the different sections within your journal, all with the same art style. Meanwhile, Skyrim's inventory interface has a blank background and 3D models for each item. From an objective standpoint, having the actual game model is pretty useful since you can look at an item up close, but from an artistic standpoint, I think having the drawings for each item and category just further adds to that medieval fantasy vibe and does make it feel more like a journal. Plus, I really like that in Oblivion you can actually see your character off to the side in your inventory. Not exactly UI related, but still a bonus. The main menu, loading screens, map, character creation, font, quest notifications, and, well, all of the designs of this game have the same look and theme, which I think really adds to the game's immersion. You feel like you're the hero of Kvatch in the Third Era, in the magical, yet racist, province of Cyrodiil.
I'm Daji. I'm a Kaji in disguise. Want to see me lick my butt?
I'm divines. You're an ugly one. And female, no less. But then, all orcs are ugly. The most repulsive race in all of Tamriel, really.
I know the Khajiit are all upset that the council took away their land and gave it to us. But they just have to get over it. It's our land now.
The cover art and game manual even have the same scroll-like design. It's awesome. Every symbol, item, and skill has a fantasy-like drawing. It just feels magical. It feels like a fantasy RPG. Skyrim just doesn't quite have that magical feeling to it from a UI design standpoint. Another major element of UI is art. Of course, I mentioned art a little bit when talking about the inventory and all the game's symbols, but the other pieces of artwork in this game are fantastic. When you select or create your character's class at the beginning of the game, each class has its own piece of art. You also select your character's birth sign, which has really cool artwork with constellations on them. And of course, the arena poster seen throughout the Imperial City goes so hard, like I need this poster in real life. The concept art is really awesome too, and some of these images even have that scroll-like background. Oblivion's UI functionality is pretty good for the most part. All of the important game menus, like your inventory and the world map, can be found within the journal, which is really convenient. The one thing I don't really care for is the map. Don't get me wrong, it looks awesome and fits the look of your journal, but it's a little annoying that you have to click and drag to look around, and you can't just zoom out and see the map as a whole. Aside from that, the journal is still pretty epic. The UI design and art come together to create a truly magical and beautiful experience for the player. Oblivion is not perfect.
They jump at me! They jump at me!
But it's still a pretty good game overall and has some amazing qualities. I honestly find the main storyline to be the most interesting one out of the entire series. And you gotta love those leveling up messages, which actually came from Morrowind, that are really inspiring. If you're a Sky Zoomer like I was and want to explore more of the Elder Scrolls series, or just want to try one of these games, definitely play Oblivion. Last but not least, let's look at the Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim from 2011. Of course, the game overall has a pretty consistent theme and feel with a mostly black and white color scheme for the heads-up display, title screen, loading screens, and menus. There are icons seen throughout the game, like for achievements, factions, map locations, services, skills, and even the Thieves Guild's shadow marks. The heads-up display of Skyrim features a compass at the top of your screen where a quest marker can appear if you have a quest selected. When you enter combat or when you look at some of your menus, your stamina, health, and magicka bars appear at the bottom of your screen with green, red, and blue. You sometimes see a bar showing your current level, like when you pull up the character menu and during loading screens, which shows a gradient blue bar. Unlike Oblivion, which has a journal that includes your maps, quests, magic, items, and stats all rolled into one, Skyrim instead separates these categories into different menus. The character menu has 4 sub-menus: skills, which is where you level up your skills by selecting perks, items, which is your inventory, the map is, well, the world map, and magic is where you access all of your spells, shouts, and active effects. The quest log and character stats are in a different menu entirely, and this menu is called a journal. This quest log is very straightforward about exactly what you need to do, usually with very brief sentences that look like bullet points that say things like, go here, do this, talk to this person. Your character's stats, or also called general stats, are where you find basic information on your character and your playthrough, like how many days have passed, how many quests you've completed, and how much you've stolen.
Stop!
The journal is also where you can see the system settings, which is a little odd that it doesn't have its own menu, but I don't know, maybe it's just me. The alchemy, enchanting, and smithing menus all look quite similar to how the items and magic submenus do.
Hi, how are you?
So I guess the big woolly mammoth in the room is the UI's functionality, which is another factor that really plays into the general distaste for Skyrim's UI. One thing that I think functions quite well is the map. I think Oblivion's map is kind of annoying to use since you have to click and drag to look around the map and you can't just zoom out and look at the map as a whole. But in Skyrim, you can move your cursor around and zoom in and out as you please. Plus, the map actually takes up your entire screen rather than just appearing in one menu. However, a big problem with most of the menus in Skyrim is the inconvenience. It can be hard to find things within your items submenu, especially since there's no search or filter options. Switching between weapons and spells, even when using the favorites menu, can still be a bit of a hassle. There's so much scrolling in a lot of these menus, like I know it's called the Elder Scrolls, but damn. It's honestly kind of lame that you can't see your character while in your inventory. When I played Oblivion, I was really excited that I could actually see my character off to the side while using my journal. Morrowind even has this with the inventory menu. Both Arena and Daggerfall does this as well. But with Skyrim, your only option is to look at your character with a third-person camera. It's not that big of a deal, but it's still a feature that I think would have been great for the game.
Smack that bitch.
I just want to see my character in her cool-ass armor like I could in Oblivion, okay? There are some beautiful design choices in this game, like the skills menu, that is just majestic. Skyrim was my first Elder Scrolls game, so it will always hold a special place in my heart no matter what. But Skyrim's UI design is...
I mean, it's alright, like...
It's nice but pretty bland, with just plain black and white menus for the most part. I guess Bethesda wanted to go for a more simplified, modern look with the menus, but it only resulted in most of the menus and the overall user interface design lacking any magic or fantastical elements.
Yeah, sure, but where's the pizzazz? Huh? Look at this place. I mean, what is the theme here? Underwater? It's boring!
And although Skyrim is a spectacular game, in the UI department, it fell a little flat. Playing through the Elder Scrolls series and seeing how the user interface evolved was really fun. The previous games each had pretty different UIs, but they each did a fantastic job of using whimsical designs, colors, art, and fonts to immerse the player into the world of the Elder Scrolls. Except Skyrim didn't do the best job at that, but still. It's hard to say which one functions the best because each game is quite different and has its own pros and cons with the UI functionality. Regarding design, I have to say that Oblivion reigns supreme for me. I've already gushed enough about the art and the UI, but still, I can't stress enough how cool it looks. The functionality could always be improved, but they really nailed it with the design. I'd love to see a return to form with the user interface for the next game in the series. Well, whenever it comes out, that is.
You dork. Go back to the chess club. Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.